Thank you very much. And thank you very much that you still have power to continue, and also in this very sad days, also what Daniel was mentioning. I will try to share the screen. My talk was meant or is meant as a contribution to the discussion of selected aspects of performativity and its documentation on the example of Slovak art production of the generation of artists of the 60s and 70s. I'm not sure if I would be able to go through all the 4 case sort of studies what I have prepared, but all these are based on my research of particular artist archives. Either those are neo-avant-garde artists of the 60s, which would be Stano Filko, living between 1937 and 2015, and Peter Bartoš, born in 1938, and as well as examples of generation of artists of the 70s, like Ľubomír Ďurček, born in 1948, and Ján Budaj, born in 1952. And to him affiliated artistic collective called Temporary Society of Intense Experience. Art historical research of their archives I conducted had also very practical framework, which was associated with the processing of existing documentations, such as scanning and so on, digitalization of the materials, and particular project I was involved in also had publication or exhibition outputs. So within my research, I was predominantly concerned with the question how to deal with these archives, or better say, with the knowledge they comprise. So, and moreover, within a selected curatorial project I was dealing with throughout the times, I often presented works of a performative nature, the meaning of which was produced in a very specific context back then, in which they were created at the time. So obviously, I was interested in a question how to mediate it to a contemporary audience. So in other words, how to convey the historical performative art to a tertiary audience who has not experienced it and can only rely on this type of mediated knowledge. As we know, unlike ancient art, which often passes through history in its physical integrity, these types of works are ephemeral and disappear with their witnesses, those who remember, who were present at the event. So, so the question, of course, is how to stage, or a never-ending question is how to stage this type of art in a museum environment, which, of course, treats works as profane thing and not mere references. So we are speaking about, if we are speaking about art that originated in the middle of life and had one's ambition to change the surrounding world, but today is just a memory. So how to update this often absent historical art so that it does not remain closed in the past, but communicates with the current viewer and is able to articulate points in a completely different context of nowadays. So as the art of the 60s and 70s is often only documentation of art and not its representation, it needs sort of a master of ceremony to set the context, and a meaningful way of restaging past event is not a representative but performative one. And because as such approach encourages viewers to actively participate and personally connect their own lives with a selected aspect of the research reality, it works also within an educational activities, as we know, or for recontextualizing historical monument or relics of the past in a public space and so on. So while dealing with the question of how to recontextualize an archive of historical events into a post-historic archive, it is also necessary to think of how to relate historical art to the contemporary exhibition practice. Also, in my curatorial views, I will very shortly outline here. I try to recognize the authentic presentation frameworks I found in artists, in particular artists' archives and practices, and to acknowledge position of the artists, how they themselves formulated them. So, last but not least, within the context of this particular symposium, I will also briefly outline specific international network potential of those mentioned figures. So I will start with Stano Filko. The image you've seen before was by Peter Bartoš. 3 horses are drinking clean water from late 70s as a peace message to for nowadays and for further talking. So Stano Filko, this what we see is already a collaborative project, white space in a white space, or fragment documentation. It is a, I would show you very fastly and very schematically just few examples how this project was developing, because exactly this is such a good example of Filko practice, where he was very much networking within the Eastern European space. Just briefly, Filko, of course, belongs to Slovak neo-avant-garde, as Peter Bartoš, Julius Koller, Alex Mlynarczyk, we already were mentioning all those, and others. And there are 2 such significant lines in Filko's work. With Mlynarczyk, he was working on the manifesto and ready-made event Hapsot. It was created by appropriating the time and space defined reality of the city of Bratislava during socialism, between celebrating the May Day and the end of Second World War, so in 1965. So this was the Hapsot 1, altogether with Zita Kostrova. Then it continued as a social happening in the further series, third series titled Action Universal, in which he appropriated the reality of Czechoslovakia with its life, past and future in space of time. That was the Hapsot 3, 1966, followed by Hapsot 4, 68, 71 till 71, in the dimensions of the whole universe. And on the contrary to the research of the physical world, to which these Hapsot projects are related, in the 70s he began to work with Miloš Laki, and who initiated the issue of white space, and altogether with Jan Zavarsky, to develop the idea of transcendence. And that was within the framework of the project and manifesto, what you can see now on the screen, White Space in a White Space, in 1973 and 74. And they formulated the idea of, how they called it, pure emotion. And similar to Hapsot, the concept of white space became Filko's lifelong project, both of these, like as well as Hapsot, as well as white space. And he further then, after the collaboration ended with Laki and Zavarsky, developed it individually. And it was developing the way that from the initial materialization of the white space in the 70s, it develops towards its sublimation in the 90s. Regarding before mentioned networking, within this project, of course, obviously, white space in a white space started in Brno, in Dům umění. These are on the screen example from manifesto from there, with text of curatorial text of Jiří Baloch. But then there were several other exhibitions. This is also exposition and like such fragments from the catalog they published to that Brno exposition. That was the exhibition not seen by public. This is the example of Hungarian presentation of the project with in collaboration with László Beke and Tomáš Strauss, as well as Jiří Baloch. And then this project was at the end of 70s already just under authorship of Stano Filko, was touring or exhibited in several occasions in Polish scenes, and either that was it was in Lublin in 1977-78, and in a Labyrinth gallery in Lublin, which published the catalog you can see now. Then this was the further on, that was the presentation in 1978 in Gdańsk, also with a text by Grzegorz Sztabinski, and then another one was the exhibition in Mala Galleria in Warsaw, 78-79. So since the end of the 70s, Filko was developing, as I told, the idea of transcendent until basically the end of his days. These are the posters from exhibitions I mentioned before. And just to close the very briefly articulated topic about the white space, in 1982, Filko emigrated from socialist Czechoslovakia to Germany. This is such his very famous exhibition in Documenta in Kassel, where he painted Škoda car he used to flee the country, and so exhibited in Kassel shortly after his arrival. Later on, he left for New York, where also he was in touch with the artistic circles around even Andy Warhol or Kate Haring. And after 80s and so-called American period of him, like where he was dealing with such neo-expressive painting, after the regime change in 1989, he returned to Slovakia, and then since early 90s, he lived in Bratislava and was involved in elaboration of his ideological system, which he called psychophilosophical system. And here are the examples from his studio, what he had in Bratislava. And in this system, just to continue with this first schema of these two lines of physical and metaphysical, here he started to explain his holistic concept of the world. So he created like a post-Big Bang part of his work in which he dealt with the physical time and space, and there he included also cosmological line of his work related to Hapsots from 60s and to that then present times, and then formulated ante-Big Bang part, which on the other hand dealt with metaphysical world. Here he included also works related to white space from 70s. And in 2005, then he started this monumental complex arc, he called it, in his native village close to Trenčín in Slovakia. And the idea was that this space, this environment would absorb all his works at the level of archive, workshop, laboratory, and institute. And so he started to build the premises around the country house of his parents and grandparents, such a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk concept, and also with including diverse elements which would define his personal life and altogether universal cosmic dialectic. So there he concentrated his extensive work, and also brought up all these layers which were layered throughout the decades in his studio in Snežienkova Street in Bratislava since the 60s, and started to work on the classification, where he started in this Snežienkova in Bratislava already. He worked on the classification of the spaces into color spaces and created such a total installation with vertical, horizontal divisions into dimensions and colors, and so somehow all that corresponded with the character of Filko's work, where each work is a part of a single life work. So that's everything is just like a partial of the whole oeuvre what he created. So However, this Veľká Hradná super ambitious project didn't end up well, and all these works were then removed by the family, and this project left unfinished. This I wanted to show you, but just probably there wouldn't be time to discuss it further. I did several exhibitions of Filko work. I was doing his exposition in Lyon Biennale 2011. This is example of the exhibition in Fondazione Mora Greco in Naples. But I would jump directly to the project I'm working on related to Filko since 2017. Pardon. And it is a project in Central Slovakian Gallery in Banská Bystrica, which in that time had the opportunity to buy extensive collection of Filko works, but all these works were rather untypical for Filko. So he's typical for his installations, environments, spatial works, but this big collection of really several 800 almost pieces were all by works like paper works of archival project sort of nature. So what you see is images from this kind of retrospective, but done without really like these installations, done explained through this kind of paperworks, where the space of the building was divided into and explained the whole system with which Filko was working. And
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mira, but we should move to the end of your presentation because we need some time also for the discussion at the end. Thank you very much.
Okay. So so there were several projects. Several artists or even non-artists dealing with the within this program. So it is meant to be a project called Hydrozoa, where diverse authors are invited who critically reconsider Filko's radical concepts, update his legacy for the present in their autonomous art project. So it is meant the aim is not the commodification, but sort of expansion of knowledge about Filko's monumental work. And first part was done by psychiatrists, like amateur artists, and dealing with relational perspective. Also, like we are doing workshops about radical ethics and hospitality, etc. There. Second part was the site-specific installation by František Demeter, Tomáš Žadoň. The artist before was Jan Balks, didn't mention. Now I'm already trying to jump too fast. And so this was the project which got the inspiration directly from Filko studio, where he was expanding to the space, building like this is to see on some images from Filko studio, and the space of the gallery was transferred into also such a silver tunnel and diverse other relations. This is a project by Sarah Jones, Australian artist who is dealing with the text as such a very performative medium. Also, she created she did the research and created the text. And all these are such a publication formats. The project by Jan Čumlivský, František Demeter, Jakub Kopec is a project called Space is the Place. And this was such a project, kind of Bauhute style, with architect, graphic designer, painter. And this is like this installation follow Filko's iconic inflatable environments like cosmos, breathing, from the late 60s, and their analogies in the so-called soft architecture, which was on an experimental level realized in 60s and 70s, and in a context of hippie counterculture. And recent project, the last from this series, was project by Petra Feriancová, and this is such a sculptural object, such 600-liter aquarium of rhombic form, and which is also appearing, this kind of shape is appearing in Filko's iconography. He's using it as a diagram of the biological nature of physical world, and also very subversively, sexistically, but in diverse. So this was like conceptualized as such a this popular schematization of the maternal internals. There were but it was, as there were fish there, specific type of fish, it was put it in a perspective of such a post-human perspective, era after nature. So I didn't get farther really much, so maybe I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we have to finish now because we don't have any time for discussion at the end.
Right.
I'm sorry for that. But,
okay, so
we have to cut it now.
Okay, so so just last thing. Then I further on, I wanted to continue with Peter Bartoš, and also this is his project in Warsaw. He was doing at the late 70s within a festival. I am, and other exhibitions of him. So I would just maybe stop then at the current exhibition, which if some of you would have some possibility to come to Bratislava, can still visit, running until the end of May in Bratislava City Gallery. And this is the exhibition called "The Whole is Less Than the Sum of Its Parts." And so it's somehow dealing with the discourse of relational ethics, and there are, besides Peter Bartoš, other artists participating: Andreas Fogarashi, Petra Feriancová, Martin Hrvol, and Lois Weinberger, Ingeborg Strobl, Anna Jermolaeva. So, and there is also paleobiological exposition within the exhibition, and so it is the whole exhibition is dealing with the relation of culture and nature, and the dichotomy running in throughout the recent human history until 19th century. How Peter Bartoš is very interestingly overcoming it, dealing with its focus on his work from 70s up till contemporary time, and his conception of urban environments. And yeah, so probably this just as a teaser, not really more analytical then. So thank you very much for your attention. So I prepared it too much, I'm sorry. So